Welcome, suffering soul. You've come here tonight, carrying pain that feels unbearable, questions that have no easy answers, wounds that ache deeper than words can express. Perhaps you feel like Job tonight, stripped of what you once held dear, confused by circumstances that make no sense, wondering where God is in your suffering. Tonight, you don't need to understand everything. You don't need to have your theology perfectly sorted before you can rest. The ancient story of Job is here to meet you in your darkest hour, to show you that even in suffering, God's love never fails. As we walk through Job's journey together, you'll discover that your pain doesn't disqualify you from God's presence. It qualifies you for His deepest compassion. You'll find that your questions aren't threats to faith. They're invitations to deeper intimacy with the one who holds all answers. Take a slow, deep breath now. Let your shoulders release their burden. Feel your body beginning to surrender to rest. Father, meet us in our suffering tonight. Show us your heart of compassion. We are your beloved children, and you see every tear. Amen. Maybe you feel like your world has collapsed around you. Everything you built, everything you trusted, everything that gave your life meaning seems to have been stripped away. The ground beneath your feet feels unsteady, and you wonder if anything in life is truly secure. Job knew this feeling intimately. In a single day, he lost his children, his wealth, his health, his standing in the community. Everything that defined him was gone. But listen to what Job discovered in his darkest moment. Job 1:21. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. Job didn't pretend the loss didn't hurt. He didn't minimize his pain or put on a brave face. He acknowledged the devastating reality. Everything was gone. But in that acknowledgement, he found something deeper than his circumstances. He found the Lord Himself. The God who gives and takes away is still worthy of praise, not because of what He allows, but because of who He is. Your losses don't diminish God's goodness. Your pain doesn't reduce His faithfulness. Even when everything else is stripped away, He remains. Perhaps you're wrestling with physical pain that seems endless, a body that betrays you daily, health that has become a source of constant struggle. You feel trapped in flesh that won't cooperate, energy that never comes, strength that has abandoned you. Job understood this torment. His body was covered with painful sores from head to foot. He scraped his skin with broken pottery just to find momentary relief. But even in his physical agony, Job made this incredible declaration. Job 19:25-6. I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end He will stand on the earth. And after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God. I know that my Redeemer lives, not I hope, or I wish, or maybe. I know. Even when his flesh was failing, even when his body was a source of constant pain, Job knew something his circumstances couldn't touch. His Redeemer lives. Your physical pain is real, your health struggles are valid, but they don't have the final word. There is one who lives, who redeems, who will restore what has been destroyed. Your body may be failing you tonight, but your Redeemer never will. Maybe you feel abandoned by friends, misunderstood by those who should support you, judged by people who think they understand your situation but have never walked in your shoes. The loneliness of suffering is sometimes worse than the suffering itself. Job's friends came to comfort him but ended up condemning him. They offered simplistic answers to complex pain, judgment where he needed compassion, lectures where he needed love. Job cried out in his isolation. Job 16:2. I have heard many things like these. You are miserable comforters, all of you. But then Job discovered something beautiful about God's heart. Job 23:10. But he knows the way that I take. When he has tested me, I will come forth as gold. He knows the way that I take. When everyone else misunderstands, when friends offer empty platitudes, when you feel completely alone in your struggle, God knows. He knows the way you take, not just where you're going, but how you're getting there. The path of pain you're walking, the route of suffering you're traveling. He knows every step, and he promises that when the testing is complete, you will come forth as gold, refined, purified, more precious than before. Your heart might be breaking tonight over dreams that have died, hopes that have been crushed, futures that will never come to pass. The grief over what will never be can feel heavier than any physical loss. Job grieved deeply for his children, for his former life, for the future he thought he would have. In his anguish, he spoke honestly about his pain. Job 3:25. What I feared has come upon me. What I dreaded has happened to me. He didn't pretend to be stronger than he felt. He acknowledged that his worst fears had become reality. But even in his honest grief, Job never lost sight of God's character. Later, he would declare, Job 42:2. I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. Even when your dreams lie in ruins, even when your hopes have been shattered, even when everything you planned has fallen apart, God's purposes remain intact. Your grief is valid, your tears are precious to Him, but His plans for your life are bigger than your current devastation. What feels like an ending may be the beginning of something you never could have imagined. Perhaps you're drowning in guilt, wondering if your suffering is punishment for past mistakes, if God is angry with you, if you somehow deserve this pain. The weight of self-blame can be crushing. Job's friends insisted that his suffering must be the result of hidden sin, that good people don't experience such devastation unless they've done something to deserve it. But God had a different perspective. Job 1:8. There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. God called Job blameless and upright even before his suffering began. Your pain is not punishment. Your struggle is not evidence of God's displeasure. You are not being disciplined for hidden failures. Sometimes suffering comes not because we've done something wrong, but because we're living in a broken world where bad things happen to good people. God sees your heart, knows your intentions, and calls you beloved even in your darkest hour. Maybe you're angry at God tonight, and that anger frightens you. You feel guilty for questioning Him, ashamed for doubting His goodness, afraid that your frustration will drive Him away. Job was brutally honest with God about his feelings. He questioned, he complained, he even wished he had never been born. But notice how God responded to Job's raw honesty. Job 42:7. After the Lord had said these things to Job, he said to Eliphaz the Temanite, I am angry with you and your two friends, because you have not spoken the truth about me, as my servant Job has. God said Job had spoken the truth about him, even in his complaints and questions. Your anger doesn't threaten God. Your doubts don't diminish His love. Your honest struggle is more precious to Him than false piety. He can handle your questions, your frustration, your raw and unfiltered pain. Bring it all to Him. He's big enough to hold it all. Your faith might feel shaken tonight, like everything you believed about God and life has been called into question. The simple answers that once satisfied you feel inadequate in the face of complex suffering. Job's faith was tested to the breaking point. Everything he thought he knew about how God works in the world was challenged, but in the end, his faith emerged stronger, deeper, more real. Job 42:5. My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Now my eyes have seen you. Job's suffering didn't destroy his faith. It refined it. What he once believed because he was taught it, he now knew because he had experienced it. The God he once heard about, he now knew personally. You're questioning, you're struggling, you're wrestling with faith. These aren't signs of weakness. They're the labor pains of a deeper, more authentic relationship with God. Perhaps you feel like you're drowning in circumstances you cannot control, swept away by forces too powerful for you to resist. The helplessness is overwhelming. Job felt completely at the mercy of forces beyond his understanding or control. But even in his helplessness, he found an anchor. Job 13:15. Me, yet will I hope in him. I will surely defend my ways to his face. Though he slay me, yet will I hope in him. This isn't passive resignation. It's radical trust. Even if the worst possible thing happens, even if God doesn't intervene the way I hope he will, even if my story doesn't end the way I want it to, I will still hope in him. Not because I understand his ways, but because I know his heart. Your circumstances may be out of control, but they're never out of his hands. Maybe you're exhausted from pretending to be okay, tired of wearing a mask that hides your real pain, weary from trying to be strong for everyone else when you feel like you're falling apart inside. Job reached a point where he couldn't pretend anymore. His pain was too deep, his questions too urgent, his struggle too real for polite facades. Job 7:11. Therefore I will not keep silent. I will speak out in the anguish of my spirit. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. I will not keep silent. Sometimes the most faithful thing you can do is stop pretending and start being real. He wants your presence, broken, messy, questioning, hurting presence. The mask you wear to protect others might be protecting you from the healing God wants to bring. Tonight, you can take off the mask. You can be honest about how hard this is. You can stop being strong and let yourself be held. Your future might look impossible right now, like there's no way forward, no hope for restoration, no possibility that things could ever be good again. Job couldn't see how his story could possibly have a good ending. The devastation was too complete, the loss too overwhelming. But God was writing a story bigger than Job could imagine. Job 42:10. After Job had prayed for his friends, the Lord restored his fortunes and gave him twice as much as he had before. God restored Job's fortunes and gave him twice as much as before. This doesn't mean God will always restore exactly what was lost, but it means God specializes in new beginnings, in resurrection stories, in beauty from ashes. The chapter you're in now is not the final chapter. The devastation you see is not the end of your story. God is still writing, still working, still planning something beautiful for your future. Your mind won't stop racing with questions, will it? Why did this happen? What did I do wrong? Where is God in this mess? The thoughts come like accusations, like prosecutors building a case against your faith, your choices, your very worth as a person. The questioning feels relentless, doesn't it? Every attempt at peace is interrupted by another why or what if, or how could God allow this? Your brain won't let you rest because it keeps trying to solve an unsolvable puzzle, to find logic in what feels completely senseless. Job knew this mental torment intimately. He wrestled with the same questions that plague you tonight. Job 3:20. Why is light given to those in misery and life to the bitter of soul, to those who long for death that does not come, who search for it more than for hidden treasure? Job was asking the hardest questions, not just, why me, but why anyone? Why does God allow light to come to people in misery? Why does life continue for those whose souls are bitter with pain? Job wasn't afraid to voice what others only think in their darkest moments. God doesn't condemn you for your questions. He doesn't punish you for wondering why. Your questioning mind isn't evidence of weak faith. It's evidence of a heart that desperately wants to understand, to find meaning, to make sense of senseless pain. God is big enough for your biggest questions. Maybe you feel completely overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of what you're facing. Not just one problem, but a cascade of difficulties that feel impossible to navigate. Every time you think you've caught your breath, another wave crashes over you. The feeling of being overwhelmed is suffocating, isn't it? Like you're drowning in problems that multiply faster than you can solve them. You look at everything on your plate and wonder how any human being could possibly handle it all. The weight of it all presses down on your chest until you can barely breathe. Job felt this same crushing overwhelm when disaster struck repeatedly. Job 6:2-3. If only my anguish could be weighed and all my misery be placed on the scales. It would surely outweigh the sand of the seas. No wonder my words have been impetuous. Job's anguish was so heavy it would outweigh the sand of the seas. That's not exaggeration. That's the honest assessment of someone drowning in more pain than seems humanly possible to bear. His words had been impetuous, rushed, desperate, raw, because when you're overwhelmed, you don't have the luxury of careful, measured responses. You're in survival mode. God sees the weight you're carrying. He knows it's more than anyone should have to bear alone. Your overwhelm isn't weakness. It's a natural response to an unnatural amount of pressure. Perhaps you're consumed with anger that frightens you with its intensity. You're angry at God for allowing this, angry at others for not understanding, angry at yourself for not being stronger, angry at the unfairness of life itself. The rage burns inside you like fire, doesn't it? Sometimes it feels cleaner than the sadness, more energizing than the despair. But it also feels dangerous. You're afraid of what you might say, what you might do, who you might hurt if you let this anger out. But you're also afraid of what will happen if you keep it bottled up inside. Job's anger was volcanic, erupting in words that shocked even himself. Job 30:22-1. I cry out to you, God, but you do not answer. I stand up, but you merely look at me. You turn on me ruthlessly. With the might of your hand, you attack me. Job accused God of being ruthless, of attacking him with divine might. These aren't the words of polite prayer. These are the words of someone whose anger has reached the boiling point. And yet God didn't strike Job down for his honesty. God didn't condemn him for his rage. Sometimes anger is the only honest response to genuine injustice. Your anger doesn't disqualify you from God's love. It qualifies you for His understanding. He knows why you're angry, and He can handle the full force of your fury. Maybe you feel completely alone in your suffering, like no one truly understands what you're going through. People offer platitudes and quick fixes, but no one seems to grasp the depth of your pain or the complexity of your situation. The isolation of suffering is its own special torture, isn't it? You're surrounded by people who care about you, but none of them really get it. They mean well, but their attempts to help often make you feel more alone. You start to feel like you're speaking a different language, living in a different reality. Job experienced this painful isolation even from his closest friends. Job 19:13, 1-4. He has alienated my family from me. My acquaintances are completely estranged from me. My relatives have gone away. My closest friends have forgotten me. Job's family was alienated, his acquaintances estranged, his closest friends had forgotten him. The people who should have been his support system became sources of additional pain. But even in his isolation, Job discovered he wasn't truly alone. God was present even when everyone else disappeared. Your loneliness is real, your isolation is painful, but you're not actually alone. There is one who never leaves, never forgets, never becomes estranged. He sits with you in your suffering. Perhaps you're drowning in grief for what you've lost, not just things or people, but parts of yourself, dreams you held, the future you thought you'd have. This isn't just sadness. It's a profound mourning for a life that will never be. The grief feels like it has physical weight, doesn't it? Like carrying stones in your chest. You grieve not just for what was, but for what will never be. The future you planned, the dreams you nurtured, the person you thought you'd become, all of it feels dead and buried. Job grieved deeply for his children, his former life, his lost future. Job 1:20. At this, Job got up and tore his robe and shaved his head. Then he fell to the ground in worship. Job tore his robe and shaved his head. Ancient expressions of profound grief. He didn't hide his devastation or pretend to be okay. He gave full expression to his sorrow. But notice what came next. He fell to the ground in worship, not because he wasn't sad, but because even in his grief, he knew God's character remained unchanged. Your grief is holy. Your tears are precious. You don't have to rush through mourning to get to acceptance. God honors your sorrow and sits with you in your tears. Maybe you feel like you're disappearing, like the person you used to be has been erased by suffering. You look in the mirror and don't recognize yourself. The confident, joyful, hopeful person you once were feels like a stranger now. The loss of identity and suffering can be disorienting, can't it? You used to know who you were, your roles, your strengths, your place in the world. But suffering has stripped away so many of the things that defined you that you're not sure who you are anymore. You feel like a ghost of your former self. Job struggled with this same identity crisis. Job 30:15. Terrors overwhelm me. My dignity is driven away as by the wind. My safety vanishes like a cloud. Job's dignity was driven away. His safety vanished. The man who was once respected, prosperous, and secure had become someone he didn't recognize. But God had a different perspective on Job's identity. Even in his lowest moment, God still called him my servant. Your circumstances may have changed everything about your external life, but they haven't changed your core identity as God's beloved child. You are still who He says you are, regardless of what you've lost. Perhaps you're paralyzed by fear about the future. If this could happen, what else might go wrong? If you could lose this much, how can you ever feel secure about anything again? The fear of future pain keeps you from engaging with life. The fear feels logical, doesn't it? Once you've experienced devastating loss, your brain goes into hypervigilant mode, scanning for threats, preparing for disasters, expecting the worst. You feel like you can't afford to hope or trust or invest in anything because it could all be taken away again. Job wrestled with this same terror. Job 3:25. What I feared has come upon me. What I dreaded has happened to me. Job's worst fears had materialized. Everything he was afraid of losing, he lost. But even after experiencing his worst-case scenario, Job didn't lose everything. He didn't lose God. He didn't lose his essential identity. He didn't lose his capacity for hope. The things you fear losing, many of them you could survive without. And the things you couldn't survive without, God won't let you lose those. Maybe you feel guilty for not being grateful, for not trusting God more, for not handling this suffering with more grace. You compare yourself to others who seem to navigate pain with more faith, more strength, more peace. The guilt feels crushing, doesn't it? On top of everything else you're dealing with, you're beating yourself up for not dealing with it better. You feel like a failure at suffering, like you're disappointing God with your lack of faith, like you should be stronger by now. But listen to how God viewed Job's struggle. Job 1:8. Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. God called Job blameless, even knowing that Job would question, complain, and struggle with faith in the coming trials. Your struggle doesn't diminish God's love for you. Your questions don't reduce your worth in His eyes. Your lack of perfect faith doesn't disqualify you from His blessing. You're not failing at suffering. You're being human in the face of inhuman pain. Perhaps you feel like your suffering is meaningless, like there's no purpose to this pain, no growth coming from this experience, no good that could possibly emerge from such devastation. The meaninglessness might be the hardest part, isn't it? If you could see some purpose, some lesson, some greater good being accomplished, maybe you could bear it. But when suffering feels random and pointless, when you can't see any positive outcome, the pain feels multiplied by its apparent futility. Job struggled with this same question of meaning. Job 14:1-2. Mortals born of woman are of few days and full of trouble. They spring up like flowers and wither away. Like fleeting shadows, they do not endure. Job saw life as full of trouble, brief and fragile, like flowers that quickly wither. He couldn't see the bigger picture, couldn't understand the purpose of his suffering. But later, God would reveal that Job's faithfulness in suffering had cosmic significance, that his endurance in the face of meaningless pain was actually profoundly meaningful. Your suffering may feel pointless, but it's not. God is weaving it into a story bigger than you can see, using it for purposes that will only become clear from heaven's perspective. Maybe you're exhausted from trying to be strong, tired of well-meaning people telling you to stay positive, weary from the pressure to find silver linings and count blessings when you're just trying to survive each day. The pressure to be positive can feel like another burden, can't it? People expect you to be inspiring, to find lessons in your suffering, to be grateful for what you still have. But sometimes you're just trying to breathe, just trying to make it through another hour. The expectation to be uplifting when you're barely hanging on feels impossible. Job reached the point where he stopped trying to be inspirational. Job 7:11. Therefore I will not keep silent. I will speak out in the anguish of my spirit. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. Job stopped keeping silent about his anguish. He gave himself permission to complain, to express the bitterness of his soul. Sometimes the most honest thing you can do is stop trying to be strong and start being real. God doesn't need your performance. He wants your authenticity. You don't have to be inspiring right now. You just have to be honest. You're wondering if you'll ever feel whole again, aren't you? If the broken pieces of your life could possibly be put back together in any meaningful way, the devastation feels so complete, so final, that restoration seems impossible. But listen to this incredible promise from Job's story, a promise made not just to him, but to you. Job 42:10. After Job had prayed for his friends, the Lord restored his fortunes and gave him twice as much as he had before. The Lord restored Job's fortunes and gave him twice as much as before. This doesn't mean God will always give you exactly double what you lost, but it means God specializes in restoration that exceeds what was lost. He doesn't just repair what's broken, He creates something better. The twice as much isn't just about quantity. It's about quality, depth, richness of experience that can only come through having walked through the valley. What feels like an ending in your life is actually God preparing for a beginning that will surpass anything you've known before. Maybe you feel like your prayers bounce off the ceiling, like God has gone silent when you need Him most. You cry out but hear nothing back. The silence feels like abandonment, like indifference to your pain. But God makes this promise about His presence in suffering. Job 23:10. But He knows the way that I take. When He has tested me, I will come forth as gold. He knows the way that you take. Not knew, not will know, but knows, present tense, active, ongoing. Even when God seems silent, even when you can't sense his presence, he knows exactly where you are on this journey. Every step you take through suffering, he's aware of. Every tear you cry, he catches. Every question you ask, he hears. The silence doesn't mean absence. It means he's working in ways too deep for words, refining you like precious gold in a fire that will one day reveal your true worth. Perhaps you're afraid this pain will never end, that you'll be stuck in this darkness forever, that healing is just a beautiful lie people tell to make themselves feel better about your situation. Listen to this promise about seasons and timing from Job's experience. Job 14:7. At least there is hope for a tree. If it is cut down, it will sprout again, and its new growth will not fail. There is hope for a tree that's been cut down. It will sprout again, and its new growth will not fail. Your life may feel cut down to the ground right now, severed from everything that made it beautiful and fruitful. But God promises new growth that will not fail. Not might sprout, not could potentially regrow, but will sprout again. The roots of your identity in God go deeper than any devastation can reach. New life is coming, and when it emerges, it will be stronger and more resilient than what was cut down. Maybe you feel like you've been forgotten, like the world has moved on while you're stuck in this place of suffering, like everyone else gets to experience joy and blessing while you're left behind. But God promises you're never forgotten, never overlooked. Job 19:25. I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end he will stand on the earth. Your Redeemer lives, not lived in the past tense, not will live in some distant future, but lives right now. He's alive, active, working on your behalf, even when you can't see it. And in the end, he will stand on the earth. Justice will be done. Wrongs will be made right. Those who have been overlooked will be seen. Those who have been forgotten will be remembered. Your story isn't over. Your Redeemer is writing a conclusion that will vindicate your faithfulness and reveal the purpose in your pain. Perhaps you feel like your suffering has no meaning, like you're enduring random pain in a chaotic universe where bad things happen to good people for no reason at all. But God reveals this profound truth about the purpose of suffering. Job 42:2. I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. Your suffering isn't random. It's not meaningless cosmic accident. There's a purpose being worked out that's bigger than your pain, deeper than your questions, more significant than your current understanding can grasp. This doesn't minimize your suffering or make it less real. It means your pain is being woven into a story of redemption that will one day reveal its profound significance. Maybe you feel weak, broken, diminished by what you've been through. You look at yourself and see only damage, only failure, only the wreckage of who you used to be. But God sees something completely different. Job 17:9. Nevertheless, the righteous will hold to their ways, and those with clean hands will grow stronger. The righteous will hold to their ways, and those with clean hands will grow stronger. Not weaker, not damaged beyond repair, but stronger. The very experiences that feel like they're destroying you are actually developing strength you didn't know you possessed. Muscles grow stronger when they're stressed and torn and allowed to heal. Your spirit is growing stronger through this process, even when it feels like it's being torn apart. Perhaps you wonder if God is angry with you, if this suffering is punishment for past mistakes, if you've somehow earned this pain through your failures. But listen to this beautiful truth about God's heart toward you. Job 1:8. Then the Lord said to Satan, Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. God called Job his servant and declared him blameless before the suffering began. Your pain isn't punishment. Your struggle isn't evidence of God's anger. You are his beloved child, not his condemned prisoner. Even in your suffering, especially in your suffering, you are precious to him. The tender pride in God's voice when he speaks of Job, that's how he speaks of you. Maybe you feel like you'll never be able to trust again, never be able to hope again, never be able to love deeply again because the risk of loss feels too great. But God promises this about your capacity for renewed trust. Job 42:5. My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Job's relationship with God was deepened, not destroyed, by his suffering. What he once believed because others told him, he now knew from personal experience. What he once trusted from a distance, he now trusted with intimate knowledge. Your capacity to trust hasn't been destroyed by betrayal or loss. It's been refined. When you're ready to trust again, it will be deeper, wiser, more precious, because it's been tested and proven genuine. Perhaps you feel like you've lost your voice, like no one would listen if you tried to tell your story, like your pain doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. But God promises this about the value of your testimony. Job 42:7-8. I am angry with you and your two friends, because you have not spoken the truth about me, as my servant Job has. My servant Job will pray for you, and I will accept his prayer. God said Job had spoken the truth about him, even in his complaints and questions. Your honest struggle, your raw prayers, your unfiltered questions, these are truth-telling that God values more than polite platitudes. Your voice matters. Your story matters. Your pain has given you authority to speak truths that others need to hear. Maybe you feel like the good you once did has been forgotten, like your life of faithfulness counts for nothing in light of your current circumstances. But God remembers, and he promises this. Job 29:2-4. How I long for the months gone by, for the days when God watched over me, when his lamp shone on my head, and by his light I walked through darkness. Job remembered the days when God's lamp shone on his head, when he walked by God's light. Those days weren't erased by his suffering. The goodness of his past, the faithfulness he showed, the light he carried, all of that still mattered. Your past faithfulness hasn't been negated by present pain. The good you've done, the love you've shown, the light you've carried, God remembers it all, and it still counts. Perhaps you wonder if you'll ever feel joy again, if laughter will ever come naturally, if life will ever feel light instead of heavy. God promises this about the return of joy. Job 8:21. He will yet fill your mouth with laughter, and your lips with shouts of joy. He will yet fill your mouth with laughter, not might, not maybe, but will. The capacity for joy isn't destroyed by suffering. It's temporarily suspended, waiting for the right moment to emerge again. The laughter that comes after deep sorrow is richer, more grateful, more precious than the laughter that never knew pain. Your lips will shout with joy again, and when they do, it will be with the deep appreciation of someone who remembers what it feels like to have no reason to smile. Maybe you feel like your future is ruined, like the best years of your life are behind you, like there's nothing left to look forward to. But listen to this promise about new beginnings. Job 42:12. The Lord blessed the latter part of Job's life more than the former part. The Lord blessed the latter part of Job's life more than the former part. Your best days aren't behind you, they're ahead of you. The more than the former part isn't just about external circumstances, it's about depth of character, richness of relationship with God, appreciation for blessing, capacity for compassion. What's coming is better than what was lost, not just different, but genuinely better. Perhaps you feel like you'll never understand why this happened, like the questions will haunt you forever, like you'll always feel like something is missing from the story. But God promises this about understanding. Job 38 2-4. Who is this that obscures my plans with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? God's response to Job wasn't to answer all his questions, but to reveal his own magnificent vastness. Some understanding comes not through explanations, but through encounters with the one who holds all explanations. You may never understand everything about your suffering, but you can know everything about the one who walked through it with you. And that knowing is enough. I know it's hard to have faith right now, when you're in this much pain, when God feels distant or even cruel, when his goodness seems like a lovely theory that doesn't match your brutal reality. Believing feels not just difficult but almost insulting to your intelligence. You want to trust, but your experience argues against it. You want to believe in God's love, but your circumstances seem to contradict it. You want to have faith, but doubt feels more honest, more realistic, more true to what you're actually experiencing. Job wrestled with this same crisis of faith. Job 13:15. Though he slay me, yet will I hope in him. I will surely defend my ways to his face. Job said, though he slay me, yet will I hope in him. This isn't blind faith. This is faith with eyes wide open. Job acknowledged that God might even allow his death, and still chose hope. This wasn't because he understood God's plan or felt good about his circumstances. This was faith in the face of the worst possible outcome. Your faith doesn't have to be based on favorable circumstances. It can be based on the character of the one who remains constant even when everything else changes. Maybe you feel like your faith is too small, too weak, too inconsistent to be worth anything. You believe one moment and doubt the next. You trust in the morning and despair by evening. The instability makes you question whether you have real faith at all. But listen to what faith looked like for Job. Job 23:8-9. But if I go to the east, he is not there. If I go to the west, I do not find him. When he is at work in the north, I do not see him. When he turns to the south, I catch no glimpse of him. Job searched for God everywhere and couldn't find him. East, west, north, south. God seemed absent in every direction. Job's faith wasn't a constant feeling of God's presence. It was a choice to keep seeking, even when the search seemed futile. Your wavering faith isn't evidence of weakness. It's evidence of a heart that refuses to give up the search, even when God seems impossible to find. Perhaps you feel like you're disappointing God with your doubt, like real believers don't struggle with faith the way you do, like your questions are evidence of spiritual failure. But notice how God responded to Job's doubts and questions. Job 42:7. After the Lord had said these things to Job, he said to Eliphaz the Temanite, I am angry with you and your two friends, because you have not spoken the truth about me, as my servant Job has. God said Job had spoken the truth about him, even though Job had complained, questioned, and struggled with doubt throughout his ordeal. Job's brutal honesty was more pleasing to God than his friends' pious platitudes. Your doubts don't disqualify you from God's favor. Your questions don't diminish his love for you. Your struggle with faith is actually faith in action. It's the faith that refuses to let go, even when holding on hurts. Maybe you're waiting for some sign, some proof, some tangible evidence that God is real and that he cares about your situation. The silence feels like absence, and you wonder if you're talking to yourself. Job longed for this same kind of concrete encounter. Job 23:3. If only I knew where to find him. If only I could go to his dwelling. Job wanted to find God's dwelling place, to have a face-to-face conversation, to get some direct answers. But God's response came not in the way Job expected, but in a way that was infinitely more powerful. When God finally spoke, it wasn't to answer Job's specific questions, but to reveal his own magnificent character. Sometimes faith grows not through getting answers, but through encountering the one who holds all answers. Perhaps you feel like others have stronger faith, better understanding, more spiritual maturity. You compare your internal struggle with their apparent confidence and feel like you're failing at being a believer. But faith isn't about comparison. It's about persistence. Job 27:5. I will never admit you are in the right. Till I die, I will not deny my integrity. Job refused to deny his integrity, even when everyone told him he should just admit he was wrong and repent of imaginary sins. Sometimes faith means holding on to what you know to be true about yourself and about God, even when everyone else thinks you should give up. Your faith doesn't have to look like anyone else's. It just has to be genuine, honest, and persistent. Maybe you're tired of trying to figure God out, exhausted from trying to make sense of his ways, weary from the mental effort of reconciling his goodness with your painful reality. Job reached this same point of intellectual exhaustion. Job 42:3. Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. Job finally admitted there were things too wonderful for him to understand. This wasn't defeat, it was relief. The burden of trying to figure God out, to solve the mystery of suffering, to understand divine logic. Job finally set it down. Some things are too wonderful, too complex, too magnificent for human understanding. Your inability to figure God out isn't a failure of faith. It's an acknowledgement of the appropriate relationship between finite and infinite. Perhaps you wonder if God really sees your specific situation, if he understands the particular nuances of your pain, if his general promises apply to your unique circumstances. But Job discovered this about God's intimate knowledge. Job 31:4. Does he not see my ways and count my every step? God sees your ways and counts your every step, not just your major decisions, not just your big moments, but every step. The small daily choices to keep going, the tiny acts of faith when you don't feel like it, the quiet moments when you choose hope over despair. He's not just generally aware of human suffering. He's specifically attentive to your suffering. Maybe you feel like you've been faithful for nothing, like your years of believing and trusting have been wasted, like God has forgotten all the times you chose him when it would have been easier not to. But God never forgets faithfulness. Job 42:8. My servant Job will pray for you, and I will accept his prayer. Even after everything Job had been through, God still called him my servant and trusted him to pray for others. Job's suffering didn't disqualify him from service. It qualified him for a deeper kind of ministry. Your faithfulness in suffering gives you authority to intercede for others. Your tested faith becomes a source of strength for those who are just beginning their own battles. Perhaps you struggle with guilt about your anger toward God, shame about your honest prayers, fear that your raw emotions will drive him away. But look at how God honored Job's emotional honesty. Job 1:22. In all this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. Job didn't sin by being angry or by questioning God. The sin would have been in charging God with wrongdoing, essentially saying God was evil or unjust. But Job never did that. He complained, he questioned, he even wished he had never been born, but he never accused God of being fundamentally bad. Your emotional honesty doesn't threaten God. Your anger doesn't diminish his love. Your raw prayers are more precious to him than polite pretense. Maybe you feel like faith should be easier by now, like you should have learned to trust more completely, like your spiritual growth has stalled in the face of suffering. But faith often grows through pressure, not pleasure. Job 23:10. but he knows the way that I take. When he has tested me, I will come forth as gold. The testing process is what produces gold. Faith that has never been tested is faith that has never been proven. What feels like your faith failing might actually be your faith growing stronger through resistance training. Gold doesn't emerge from comfortable circumstances. It emerges from fire. Your faith is being refined, not destroyed. Perhaps you wonder if it's okay to just barely hang on, if minimal faith is enough, if you have to feel strong and confident to be pleasing to God. But sometimes hanging on by a thread is the greatest act of faith. Job 19:25. I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end he will stand on the earth. In Job's darkest moment, when everything was gone and his body was failing, he made this incredible declaration of faith. I know that my Redeemer lives. Not, I hope, or I think, or maybe, but I know. This wasn't based on feelings or circumstances or evidence. This was faith holding on to what it knew to be true when everything else suggested otherwise. Your threadbare faith that keeps whispering, my Redeemer lives, in the darkness, is more precious to God than confident faith that has never been tested. Your mind has been churning all day with the heavy questions, hasn't it? Wrestling with pain that has no easy answers, carrying burdens that feel too heavy for any one person to bear. Even now, as you try to rest, the thoughts keep coming like waves. Why did this happen? Where was God when you needed him most? How do you move forward from here? The questions feel urgent, demanding answers you don't have, solutions you can't find. Job knew this kind of mental exhaustion, this wrestling with questions that seem to have no good answers. Job 3:26. I have no peace, no quietness. I have no rest, but only turmoil. Job said, I have no peace, no quietness. I have no rest. The turmoil wasn't just external circumstances, it was internal chaos, a mind that couldn't find stillness, a heart that couldn't find quiet. But even in that turmoil, Job was moving toward a place of peace that surpassed understanding. Take a deeper breath now. Let it out slowly. You don't have to solve everything tonight. You don't have to understand everything before you can rest. Perhaps your heart is heavy with grief tonight, weighed down by losses that feel too great to bear. The sadness sits on your chest like a physical weight, making even breathing feel difficult. Job understood this crushing grief. Job 16:6. Yet if I speak, my pain is not relieved, and if I refrain, it does not go away. Speaking didn't relieve Job's pain, and staying silent didn't make it go away either. Sometimes pain just has to be carried, held, endured, until time and God's grace begin their healing work. But you don't have to carry it alone tonight. Let your shoulders drop. Feel the tension beginning to release. You've been carrying so much today. It's okay to set it down for these hours of rest. Maybe you've been trying so hard to be strong, to hold everything together, to keep functioning despite the overwhelming nature of what you're facing. The effort is exhausting, isn't it? Listen to what Job discovered about the limits of human strength. Job 14:1. Mortals born of woman are of few days and full of trouble. Job acknowledged that human life is full of trouble and of few days. He wasn't being pessimistic. He was being realistic about the human condition. We weren't designed to carry infinite burdens or solve every problem. We were designed to lean on infinite strength, to rest in arms that never grow weary. Feel your body beginning to understand that it's time to rest now. Your muscles don't need to stay tense. Your mind doesn't need to stay vigilant. You are safe here. Your spirit may feel bruised tonight, tender from all the ways life has been harder than you expected. The innocence you once had about how the world works, about how good people are treated, about how prayers are answered. That innocence feels lost forever. But Job learned something beautiful about spiritual resilience. Job 42:5. My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Job's faith didn't return to its original form. It emerged deeper, richer, more real than before. What he once believed because others told him, he now knew from personal experience. Your spiritual innocence may be gone, but spiritual maturity is taking its place. The faith that emerges from suffering is more precious than the faith that never knew pain. Allow your breathing to slow naturally now. In through your nose. Hold gently. Out through your mouth. Each breath is releasing what you cannot control and receiving what your soul needs. Perhaps you've felt abandoned tonight, like the God you thought you knew has disappeared just when you needed him most. The silence where you expected comfort feels deafening. Job felt this same sense of divine absence. Job 23:8-9. But if I go to the east, he is not there. If I go to the west, I do not find him. When he is at work in the north, I do not see him. When he turns to the south, I catch no glimpse of him. Job searched in every direction and couldn't find God. But God was there all along, working in ways too deep for Job to see, caring in ways too profound for Job to recognize. Sometimes God's presence is most real when it feels most absent. Let your hands unfold if they've been clenched. Release your grip on the problems you've been holding so tightly. Imagine placing each worry, each question, each burden into hands much stronger than yours. Your body is growing heavy now, isn't it? That's right, that's natural. Your nervous system is finally beginning to trust that it's safe to let go, safe to stop being on high alert, safe to rest. Maybe you feel like you've lost parts of yourself in this suffering, like the person you used to be has been carved away by pain until you're not sure who's left. But Job discovered something profound about identity through loss. Job 1:21. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. Naked I came, and naked I will depart. Job realized that everything external was temporary, but something essential remained untouchable by loss. Your core identity, your belovedness to God, your fundamental worth. None of this can be taken away by circumstances. What feels like loss of self is actually the stripping away of everything that isn't truly you. Your eyelids are growing heavier. That's perfectly right. Your body knows what it needs, and what it needs now is deep, healing rest. The voices in your mind that have been so loud today, the internal commentary that never seems to stop, even these are beginning to quiet now, like turning down the volume gradually until there's just gentle silence, peaceful stillness. Perhaps you're worried about tomorrow, about how you'll find the strength to face another day of this struggle. The thought of waking up to the same pain, the same problems, the same overwhelming reality feels too much. But listen to this gentle truth about daily strength. Job 23:10. But he knows the way that I take. When he has tested me, I will come forth as gold. He knows the way that you take. Every step of tomorrow's journey, he already sees. Every challenge you'll face, he's already preparing you for. You don't have to find strength for the whole journey tonight, just enough to rest now, trusting that tomorrow's grace will come with tomorrow's sunrise. Feel yourself sinking deeper into rest, like settling into warm, peaceful water, letting it support your weight completely. No need to stay alert, no need to keep solving, just let go. Your breath is becoming deeper, more rhythmic, like gentle waves on a peaceful shore. In and out, in and out, each breath taking you deeper into the quiet place where healing happens. the pain you've been carrying. It doesn't have to stay so tight in your chest tonight. You can let it soften, let it spread out, let it be held by something bigger than yourself. Job learned this about letting go. Job 42:2. I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. You can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. The things you cannot do, the problems you cannot solve, the pain you cannot heal, these are not your responsibilities tonight. They belong to the one who can do all things, whose purposes cannot be thwarted even by the worst suffering. Your whole body is relaxing now. From the top of your head, down through your face, releasing all tension. Your neck and shoulders letting go of the day's burden. Your arms growing heavy and peaceful. The urgent feeling that you must stay awake, must keep thinking, must keep trying to understand, that feeling is fading now. There's nothing you need to figure out in these quiet hours. Nothing you need to solve before morning comes. Job found this same release. Job 11:18. You will be secure because there is hope. You will look about you and take your rest in safety. You will take your rest in safety. Even in the midst of loss, even without all the answers, even with questions still unanswered, you can rest in safety. Not because everything is resolved, but because you are held by the one who holds all resolutions. The last thoughts of the day are drifting away now, like leaves floating downstream. You don't need to hold on to them. You can let them go. Let them drift away into the peaceful darkness. Your breathing is deep and rhythmic now. Your heartbeat steady and calm. Your body is doing what it was designed to do, healing, restoring, renewing while you rest. Job discovered this beautiful truth. Job 42:12. The Lord blessed the latter part of Job's life more than the former part. The latter part more than the former part. Your story isn't over. The best chapters may still be unwritten, but for now, you don't need to think about chapters or stories or futures. For now, there's just this moment, this breath, this gradual sinking into healing sleep. You are seen in your suffering. You are loved in your questions. You are held in your pain. Like Job, you will emerge from this testing as gold, refined, precious, stronger. But tonight, you can simply rest, trusting the one who watches over you while you sleep. Rest now, beloved. Let go completely. Sink into the deep, peaceful sleep that restores what the day has worn away. You are safe. You are loved. You are never alone. Rest.